let's talk about the endocrine system. It's from chapter 10 in your textbook. It's a fascinating system, very much related to the nervous system. The nervous system and the endocrine system differ in two critical ways. The nervous system sends signals very rapidly and uses neurotransmitters which are reabsorbed rather rapidly too, so the effects are very short-lived. Whereas with the endocrine system, the effects are slower to take place, and they have much longer lasting effects on the body because the endocrine organs secrete hormones into the body fluids. The body fluids then circulate throughout the body until they reach cells that have specific receptors for those hormones. And these cells are called target cells. If there's many target cells in an organ, then we call it a target organ. There are basically two types of glands in the body. We have endocrine and exocrine glands. The endocrine glands are the ones that we're going to be talking about in the endocrine system, and they're the ones that secrete their hormones into body fluids. The exocrine glands secrete their fluids into ducts. These are like the sweat glands and the glands in the gastric pits, in the stomach, etc., that secrete into the GI tract. So endocrine glands are the ones that we're going to focus on. The endocrine system is important to massage therapists because as you're doing the massage, you're altering the circulation, you're improving their circulation, and this in turn affects the hormone circulation through the body. So you definitely have a stimulatory effect on the endocrine system. In reality, every cell in the body is actually an endocrine organ in and of itself because the definition of an endocrine organ is an organ that secretes a hormone into the body fluids, and most cells of the body have some form of communication with the cells around them. However, we focus on a few main organs as the endocrine organs when we talk about this system, and they include the pituitary gland, the thyroid gland, the parathyroid glands, the adrenal glands, the pancreas, and a variety of other tissues that we'll look at a little bit more specifically too. These are all controlled by the master gland, the hypothalamus. Let's talk about the classification of hormones. We have two ways of classifying, functionally and chemically. The first functional classification, there's three types. There's the tropic hormones, the sex hormones, and the anabolic hormones. The tropic hormones are those hormones produced in one organ that stimulate the production of a second hormone in another organ. So tropic hormones are stimulating the production of yet another hormone. Sex hormones are the hormones responsible for the development of secondary sex characteristics in males and females. We think of estrogen and progesterone for women, and we think of testosterone in men. Anabolic hormones, on the other hand, are those that stimulate the production of new proteins, or the synthesis of proteins in the body, and help to build the body up more. When we chemically classify hormones, we have two types, the steroidal and the non-steroidal. The steroidal ones here on the left you can see are the corticoids and the sex hormones. Of course, for the female we have the estrogens and the progesterones, and for the males we have androgens such as testosterone. The non-steroidal hormones on the right-hand side here are composed of peptides, which, for example, are insulin and glucagon. And then we have amino acid derivatives. And for example, here would be the amino acid tyrosine helps to produce epinephrine, norepinephrine, and dopamine, which are three important neurotransmitters but are also useful as hormones. Then we have some other miscellaneous types, such as larger proteins and glycoproteins and prostaglandins, cytokines, and some of these other types, which we'll briefly talk about in our lecture later. Steroidal hormones are fat-soluble, so as we look at how they work, they are secreted into the bloodstream, and when they reach their target cell, they pass right through the cell membrane and right through the nuclear membrane, and they have receptors all the way inside on the chromosomes. So here, once they attach to their receptor site, they can influence the expression of certain genes, and so that's how the steroid hormones work. Here we can see an example of a steroidal hormone, estrogen, as it passes from the bloodstream through the cell membrane, through the nuclear membrane, and binds to its receptor complex inside the DNA, and it causes the expression of a specific gene and the production of a specific protein. Non-steroidal hormones, on the other hand, do not go through the cell membranes. They're not fat-soluble, so they have to bind with a hormone receptor complex in the membrane of the target cell. After they bind, they activate a G protein on the inside of the membrane, and that activates adenylate cyclase. Adenylate cyclase then takes ATP that's present in the cell and changes it into cyclic AMP. Cyclic AMP then acts as another messenger within the cell, and it activates proteins, protein kinases, and they in turn activate certain substrates or chemicals present in the cell, and that initially is what causes the cellular changes. So we have an exponential growth. One steroidal hormone may activate many ATP molecules into CAMP. That may activate thousands of protein kinases, and then we have hundreds of thousands of substrates that are activated then just from the single hormone that attaches to the membrane of the cell. So there's exponential growth in terms of the effects on the cell. So here's just another look at the same idea with the non-steroidal hormones. You have a protein-based hormone, which is obviously non-steroidal, binding with its receptor complex in the cell membrane. The G protein gets activated. That activates the enzyme, the cyclase enzyme, that changes ATP into cyclic AMP, and the cyclic AMP then is activating other enzymes, and those help to regulate cellular activity and create the cellular changes. So this is just a simplified version of the same diagram we saw in the last slide. Let's talk about the way that we regulate the hormone production in our bodies. Most of the hormones are regulated by negative feedback loops, and again, a negative feedback loop is a mechanism that helps to reverse the changes in a physiological system. So, first of all, the change here in our example is that the person eats, and through their intestines we absorb a lot of glucose. Our blood sugar goes up. The pancreas senses this and produces insulin. Insulin is the hormone that stimulates the cells to uptake glucose. So the liver cells are stimulated, they uptake all this glucose, and the level of glucose goes down. The level of glucose going down decreases its stimulation on the pancreas, so less insulin is produced, and we would go back to a regular homeostatic level. The last of the types of hormones that we're just going to be talking about briefly are prostaglandins. Prostaglandins were originally discovered by a gentleman who was studying substances in prostate tissue, and that's where they got their name. However, they are produced by many, many types of cells in the body. They have powerful effects. They're lipid soluble, and they affect the cells in the neighboring tissue. So they don't travel, widespread throughout the body, but they affect the local area. They have effects such as relaxing smooth muscle or perhaps causing it to contract depending on the type of smooth muscle and receptors on it. They have the effect of secreting more hormones. They change blood pressure, and they induce inflammation. They affect respiration, gastrointestinal secretions, and even reproduction. We have several different classes of prostaglandins. We have prostaglandins A, E, and F, to name a few, and they are responsible for these responses to tissue damage. So they cause heat, they cause fever, they cause redness, they cause swelling, they cause pain, and they can lead to loss of function.